Sarah, that's great. Welcome back, everybody, to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We're going to begin. Well, we began last week talking about the elements that we want to include in a housing bill. And Keisha has been collecting some work. We're going to continue to look at that and work on that. I've been collecting the things that have been proposed to us and that we are considering, both from the administration's proposals and from other partners that have come to us. So we're together collecting a number of things. I think today, Cam, as you all know, the House has had a bill deadline this Friday, next Friday, and that has been a huge challenge with our wonderful but limited legislative council, not limited in skill and talent, but limited in terms of numbers. And so what I thought we'd at least begin to do is we have language on a lot of this. David, this is often how we work when we need to get bills out, but don't have the time. Well, this is the way this committee has often worked. So Cam, if you'd be kind enough, and then Keisha we will look through the list that we have on deck, and then we'll add the work that Keisha has also been collecting, because we have a lot of that. And we're gonna by next week we'll have a draft, I think, put together with these pieces in it for us to review. So I have a copy, but if you could chat about each of these. So I have a copy of some of the things that I've been collecting on behalf of all of us. I mean, this is our bill. And these are some of the elements Keisha and I and Ann Watson, we've all been talking, and this is just the, here you go. I'll give this to you actually after I'm done, because I don't know. So, Cam, would you be kind enough to start and just identify where we, and anyway.
Can I just ask, are we going to devote 10 minutes to this and 10 minutes to my proposal?
I think it's all going to be part of our, absolutely. Let's
do that. Yes, because
I think that's great.
These are pretty easy to understand. They're just rehashing past proposed.
Thank you.
To jump in,
I think these are collecting some of the things that have been proposed for this year and that are in the governor's proposal, and I think they're the pieces that this committee would be addressing.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. It's wonderful to be with you this morning. Friday, happy Friday, right before a holiday. Where's the red?
Happy back. Well,
the red. I thought about wearing some red. My alma mater has a big basketball game tomorrow that I'm excited about. So, anyway, so what I've been doing, quick kind of summation of where we're at. So this committee, we're going to be working on a omnibus kind of committee bill for housing. We'll be doing the House General Committee is looking to do the same thing. So I've been trying to pull together a lot of pieces to put together into a proposal, and my goal is to have language for you all beginning next week. So I don't have anything to share on paper, but we do have concepts that I've been working with the chair on pulling together to review and others. So for starters, just looking at the first document that I have, so elements for a housing bill here. A lot of these things have been proposed in the administration's proposed housing language, which we are also trying to finish putting into a bill for introduction, and hopefully that will be introduced next week as well. But that language has been shared. You all walked through it for the joint committee with the House a few weeks ago. So just kind of starting at the top here, there have been proposals to add additional funding for brownfield and brownfield developments. I believe there's proposals in the administration's language to that effect, and
we'll be adding to them. We Randy and I and Mark Mahaly and Ashley met yesterday with ANR, and I think we have some very constructive ways that we can speed up brownfield work, add more money to it, and I think so. Unlike the governor's proposal, this has an additional $6 million ask that we can discuss that amount, but to actually get more completed, because without the grants, they don't get finished. So that will be probably in addition, and we'll incorporate the things that Randy and I talked about yesterday.
Yeah. So then moving to the next piece, we have project-based TIFs and or Spark. So Spark's project-based tips that was in the administration's proposal, pulling that over and allowing you to kind of massage it and move that forward if that's what
Right,
you all would like.
and we'll be hearing from Let's Build Homes, which has a slightly different proposal. The House is working very hard on this. We may have it the skeleton of this in our bill, but the House is going to take the start on this because, as you know, the House begins the money bills. And so money for housing, we want to make sure is embedded in the House bill so that it gets hopefully embedded in the bill that comes to us from the House. So I think that whole proposal is going to be taking a very interesting and slightly different shape, is my guess.
What is your
That's fine.
understanding of the path in the House? Because
The path in the House that they are meeting,
on that.
right, the path in the House is there's a meeting on Tuesday with the key chairs of all the committees that need to green light and say, yes, we're going to be doing a project-based tip-like proposal this year, and that there is definitely a pathway to get it out of the House, and there is support in Ways and Means. That is the key piece that is being discussed and determined on Tuesday, and if there isn't that path, we aren't doing it. Because it's a waste of time. I mean, anyway, because that we can't have just, it's hard to have one committee holding up what could be very productive and helpful tool that we all need, and particularly our smaller communities need.
And I'll use the opportunity just real quick to comment, I'm doing my best to kind of be the point person to the extent that I can regarding housing matters for the office. These bills, your committee bill, same thing, the House side, their committee bill, they sit with me. But just know that a lot of these items are farmed out and managed by, some of my colleagues. So for example, on the TIFs and the Spark, that is language that's actually being worked on by John in our office. And then some of these matters would be worked on by Ellen, for example, if it's land use, or O'Grady, if it's a wetlands or stormwater, et cetera. So just understand I can't speak to details on a lot of this stuff, but we do have people in the office who would be kind of working on it and coming in and talking with you about it. So kind of running through. Okay, so we have both in the administration's proposal, but also in conversations, with the chair and with others, wanting to include something related to, the VHIP program, potentially making that permanent, adding additional funding to support the work that's going on. I think there's also a few proposals on making some tweaks to that program. But we can get into that here shortly. Same thing with accessory dwelling units, wanting to discuss whether or not it's appropriate to, fund or support additional development of accessory dwelling units to try to bring those online and or incentivize accessory dwelling units to be used for long-term rental housing. So we've had some discussion about adding that into a committee bill with language. We have continuing to walk through this first document here, middle income housing admin proposal, rental revolving loan fund admin proposal, down payment assistance programs. These are, my understanding, programs that are run by the Vermont Housing Finance Agency that you all, have heard testimony on and are aware of. So just, adding different, amounts of appropriations to continue those programs for the work that they're doing. Manufactured home renovations. So there's language in the administration proposal regarding, I think it's a manufactured home repair improvement program, adding funding to support that. We have mobile home lot rent reduction. So this is actually currently in the committee, or a version of it in the committee as S34, which I believe that we're going to walk through on Tuesday morning.
Correct.
So I'll be with the committee to discuss that. But that's, a proposal to kind of keep lot rent increases for mobile home parks, stabilize those, if you will. We have off-site housing construction. So I had a lot of conversations about, manufactured housing. How do we support that? How do we incentivize that here in the state? And then statewide building code. We've had conversations about, I've had conversations with the chair, with others, and I believe you've all taken testimony on this piece, in particular about whether or not it's appropriate to set up a statewide housing code. I know there's a current task force that's looking at it, from my understanding from the kind of residential and commercial energy efficiency codes, but also looking at it of whether it's appropriate to have a statewide housing code as well, kind of part of their charge. So we're going to continue discussions.
I also found out that we have one in play at the moment. And so we need to, from Ellen, we found out in our meeting yesterday that there is actually one happening. So what I was a little puzzled that Chad and Maura are asking for one when there's one in existence. So we will find out more about that. And also Chad wants to make sure we continue the conversation about offsite construction. There is actually an element of there is an element, there's a need financially for us to continue this work. So this is great. And I know that I have DW David Weeks here for issues that I know that he wants us to be addressing. And I'm not sure they may be big enough so that I don't know, but we can certainly start putting some of them in play. And I know there are ways that we can do some of these things. So, but given we have a limited time, I'd love to pivot to Keisha's collection because Keisha has a lot of additional things. I forgot to mention with the landlord tenant piece that the house is definitely doing that. Keisha has some different ideas. So
Yeah.
in addition, so why don't you launch into yours because you've got a lot of great ideas.
Thank you. And when I was sitting at the head of the table, I tried not to wait for the house on things. And that would be what I propose to this committee as the best policy if we're going to get a strong housing bill done. I just ran into the chair of Ways and Means who's not feeling very positively about the project-based TIFs. So, as a member of this committee, I just think it's important that we make sure we're proud of our work and then let it go from here. There's a number of pieces here, more than I can really dive into in 10 minutes. I think these are very smart and small pieces of landlord tenant law. One has a study that was just returned to us by the treasurer's office, where more and more entities are available to help figure out how to put rental payment on credit score. This is supported by a lot of landlords I've talked to because it's just a positive way to know that somebody is timely in their rent, which is usually one of the most timely payments they try to make and often isn't reflected in their financial health otherwise. I am going to be looking at homeowners association. I think, those need to be questioned about ways that, because there's more and more of them, especially that they are limiting the kinds of tools that we want to make available to create density and smart growth. So I am aware that some either limit by percentage or prevent altogether long-term rental. As more and more people cannot afford to purchase a home with current interest rate, I have a problem with people icing out those who would be long-term renters.
I don't want to cut into your time, but I'm very
Yeah.
intrigued by this topic, and I'd love to make sure that we, in that conversation, both narrow the scope of HOAs, but while at the same time possibly making it easier for the things like stormwater to be easier
Sure.
for people to actually form
That's
HOAs
great.
for purposes that do make a lot of sense.
That's great. I love that. And Senator Watson wants to work on energy efficiency, and it's been brought to my attention that some people in HOAs would also like to do ADUs and are prevented from.
And there's also Alex Farrell has brought to us a concern, and I'm not fully clear on senior housing, senior mobile homes with HOAs.
Okay.
Not the,
That's the 3-acre rule that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So we're going to have to look at the 3-acre rule as well. Naturally, causing a lot of housing costs and housing governance concern. Oh, thank you. I was worried that it wasn't coming because I know you weren't planning on being here necessarily. So in case you don't want to look at my chicken scratch.
no, I think it's all good.
I put these under big, broad buckets for myself more than others for Karen's purposes, because they could be multiple bills, which sometimes others prefer, but I do prefer omnibus bills. So they're all large topics. Fair housing, we've often taken a look at in our omnibus housing bills. The question of immigration status not being a factor by which somebody is rendered ineligible for opportunities to rent has come up again, come up in the news. And, wanted to raise that topic again and make it part of the bill we look at rather than a separate issue. I know people have talked about disability related housing, small nibbles at this issue. I think we need to really confront it head on, and put some money there, and also take a look at the significant limitation from a human services perspective that's put on families being able to receive human services dollars if their own adult disabled child is under their roof. I understand the value of giving that adult child independence, but I'd like to see how we could fund ADUs and other partitioned spaces where that person has some privacy, but we also recognize it's very hard to find someone who's going to house you right now if you are an adult disabled child and or an adult with a disability, and the family cannot be financially compensated. Only someone who's a stranger can be at this time. Wake Robin, this has come up, we voted this out last time. I call it the Wake Robin fix. I'm breaking my own rule because it shouldn't be called that. It's any place that offers long-term care within their housing portfolio. You often pay up front for what may or may not be the full use of their spectrum of services. So if you two loved ones go into assisted living and one needs skilled nursing, you can move through their pipeline but stay in this community. I think that's a value for everyone. I think more places are looking at that model, but you are taxed. And you are kind of penalized for that policy choice that those facilities are
At what
making.
point do you tax on progressive care?
You're
Because it's a progressive care community.
right.
And so at what point are you taxed on that?
So you're taxed on your payments that are rolled together in terms of housing and long-term care.
Because you're charged a monthly amount,
Mhm.
and then the monthly amount is more as your care needs progress.
Well,
Generally, they do.
I mean, sure, but it's more that if you just are receiving long-term care, that's not taxed elsewhere.
Got it. Okay. So sinking those.
Yes. Housing affordability, which I would put squarely at the feet of density and regulatory issues right now. Historic preservation, I am poking that bear. We had that exchange with Gus in committee. When we're not talking about the envelope of a building, which is usually what's considered our flagship in Vermont, our downtowns with their beautiful historic buildings, which, by the way, based on current permitting processes, probably couldn't be built today. And also when we're not talking about, we're talking about something that's extremely expensive internal that also loses units. We should ensure that SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, is only requiring things internally that are federally required so that they get their federal grants, and not adding their own subjective sense of keep this old staircase, et cetera, where Gus said that kind of decision has cost them 3 units of affordable housing in a particular project.
I think housing affordability to take a look at time limiting related to regulatory actions.
So now it gets a little messy because
Right. And
some of those other proposals are at the bottom. But
It's really important.
I have two, I probably have more, but I have 2 that come to mind that are specific to that I don't know exactly where they're reflected in this. But one is basically saying the governor can declare a housing state of emergency and shorten the A&R permit timeline. It's not in there yet. Some of us believe that could be done now. A&R is probably going to ask for more money, but the Association of Architects, AIA, and others have basically said someone can go on vacation for 3 months and we just don't get our permit. That just shouldn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think that's somewhat within our power, but if A&R comes in and tells us they need resources to do that, I think we should take that seriously, just like in the judiciary. 2, I am working.
We do an ROI.
Yes, exactly. I'm working with AGC and others to look into something in Massachusetts where you can secure you can reasonably secure financing, even if your project is goes into appeal. So I think Massachusetts, like we looked at last year, realized their appeal bond, it might not be the most effective because of access to justice and constitutional concerns. So I'd like us to explore a point at which you can certainly have your day in court and appeal, but that should not stop a project from moving forward. I'm proposing that that would be after you get your A&R permits and your municipal permits. If there's an appeal, it should still be fairly certain to the financiers that this project has broad agreement and will happen. And what they do in Massachusetts is add remediation dollars on the end should that come up. But in my mind, this takes out the ability to put someone back through the entire process they just went through. And we should recognize that when Act 250 was created, we did not have all of these other permit processes. So to the extent that we are not getting rid of Act 250, but saying Act 250 should not be simply another opportunity to run the clock for another almost infinite amount of time, or add infinite cost. And the project should be allowed to continue, but it is still our double check on all of the other permits, which seems to be the fitting place for it, not to be something that stops.
Hear what the courts have to say about this.
I want to hear what the courts have to say, and I'd love to hear from Massachusetts. Yeah,
Pretend.
and that's why I asked the things.
Governor Tom wants for reasons.
This is something the Pew Charitable Trust brought to us last biennium that I don't think it's a huge deal, but symbolically just allowing manufactured housing anywhere stick-built housing is. The forgivable loan piece has come up a lot with taxing housing appropriations. Anywhere we have a grant, we should be looking at reducing the tax burden of that grant or loan.
That goes to the ADU tax proposal that we have.
It goes to a
earlier.
lot
It has
of things.
Right.
We're talking about first gen. Senator Watson has agreed to look at the issue of contaminated soils in her committee. We're trucking dirt all over the country, all over the state, at least, to a landfill that has very finite capacity left. And I'm asking A&R to look at whether or not that has helped with public health impacts and environmental impacts, or whether it's way outsized cost and time burden for the value.
And we got good feeling from A&R yesterday that that is something that they're very open to discussing. Even with A&R yesterday, just the simple fact of declaring that housing has to be a priority, really directing A&R to make housing a priority, which means because with our brownfield projects, housing projects are a priority. So that is a simple thing we could do to make sure that we have housing a priority with A&R.
There's a lot more. The broad strokes, I think we need to look at people who are priority for housing for government subsidized units, not just if they're homeless or refugees, but if they are what I would call climate refugees, if they have lost their quality of housing from a climate event in the state of Vermont. So I have a number of things in terms of climate displacement. I said to Cameron, I want to start with common sense and work backward. I'd like to see us allow for by right building on someone's property if they're building something for their family member.
Yeah.
We hear all the time that someone wants to add a standing single family home for a relative, and now it's going to cost them more than if they went out on the open market. That's silly, and we need to return to that compound style that is very well known in Vermont. The density algorithm, you all have heard me talk about this. I think it's going to be maybe brilliant or maybe completely unworkable, but going to make it work. We do have Home Act cleanup to do. We have had some litigation.
Yeah.
Senator Chin and I know this well. People are wanting us to underscore our intent in some cases, or just revisit some of our decisions for clarity. And so we need to look back at that. Number 7, I'm not even sure what this is, but the ski areas, I don't know. This is what I think is supposed to be helpful to the ski areas, which are building large, dense villages in their own universe of space and want to be considered for 1A and 1B tier status. Land banks have come up a lot. Don't have to rehash that. I think we need to look at what other states and municipalities are doing to get creative about vacant commercial buildings, and largely vacant property year round. Employee sponsored housing is on there just because I think we need to make sure it works for people, that we're not tying people's housing to their employment in a way that doesn't have some protections from the state. I don't know what those are, but I do think we need to look
Well, it
at it.
comes up with ag housing
It comes up
with a lot of it.
everything. So, there's probably more that I've sent to Cameron.
Yeah, I would say for both, for,
Yeah,
for both,
what we
both,
have,
yeah.
yes, for both, when we're talking with, the chair and then talking with Senator Ransdale as well, if there are a few things that aren't reflected here, there's a little bit of overlap as well, so just know.
So we're just, everybody should know, we're working on this, and we'll hopefully have things to actually look on paper next week. And if you have additional ideas to add, to amplify this is the time to at least get them in the list. We have pages that we're honoring right now, so I want to make sure that we're up there because I know you have constituents and